Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most intense and consequential developments unfolding across Eastern Europe. The rail war triggered by Poland's shutdown of the Moscow-Belarus corridor. This single move has sent shockwaves through politics, security, trade, and global supply chains. In this video, we will unpack how it started, why it matters, and what the future could look like. The discussion will be detailed, but the paragraphs will stay short and easy to follow. The crisis began when Poland abruptly closed all of its border crossings with Belarus, cutting off a vital rail link used heavily by Russia and also central to Chinese freight trains entering Europe. The closure wasn't just a bureaucratic decision. It was a bold political signal. Poland announced that the shutdown was necessary due to rising threats coming from Russian, Belarusian military drills, which Warsaw believed were uncomfortably close to NATO borders and deliberately provocative. This created immediate tension because the corridor has long been more than just a transportation route. It is an economic lifeline, a strategic artery, and a diplomatic pressure point all rolled into one. The moment the crossings shut, the impact was immediate and dramatic. Hundreds of freight trains were suddenly stranded. These trains carried everything from consumer goods to electronics to industrial equipment. Many companies had relied on this corridor for its speed, cost-effectiveness, and reliability. Suddenly that certainty vanished and businesses had to scramble for alternatives. With ships already overburdened and southern rail routes slower and more expensive, the move created a ripple effect across Europe and Asia. Poland argued that the shutdown was necessary to protect its national security. Its leaders said the joint Russia-Belarus military drills posed a serious risk, suggesting that what Russia couldn't achieve through open warfare, it might try through hybrid tactics. This included potential sabotage, intelligence operations, or creating pressure on NATO's eastern flank, while the world focused elsewhere. Poland made it clear that it would not allow any vulnerability to go unchecked, even if that meant economic sacrifices. Russia, unsurprisingly, reacted angrily to the shutdown. Moscow accused Warsaw of escalating the situation and turning an economic issue into a political weapon. Russia argued that Poland was trying to pressure Belarus and undermine Moscow's influence in the region. The Kremlin also warned that such a move would not go unanswered, but Poland maintained that border security and national stability came first, and that economics could not override its obligation to protect its citizens. What made the situation even more alarming was that it didn't happen in isolation. Around the same time, Poland reported multiple attempted acts of sabotage along rail lines closer to the Ukrainian border. One incident involved an explosion damaging a railway section, and Polish officials immediately suspected it was linked to Russian intelligence operations. These attacks convinced Poland that the threat wasn't theoretical, it was real, active, and growing. The government responded by strengthening security, increasing patrols, and tightening surveillance across critical infrastructure. As tensions escalated, the rail war took on an even more symbolic meaning. Suddenly, the tracks themselves were no longer just metal rails on the ground. They became strategic assets, vulnerable points, and potential battlegrounds in a geopolitical struggle. Poland insisted that anyone trying to weaken the country through sabotage or intimidation would face consequences. The closure of Russia's last consulate inside Poland was another signal that Warsaw was done playing diplomatically polite games. Another major dimension of this crisis involves China, which is the largest foreign stakeholder in the corridor. The rail line between China and Europe was one of the hallmarks of modern freight logistics, cutting shipping time drastically and allowing Chinese goods to reach European markets quickly. But when Poland shut the corridor, Beijing found itself unexpectedly caught in the middle. Chinese companies suddenly faced major delays. Goods that should have reached Europe in 2 weeks were now stuck indefinitely. This forced China to reevaluate the reliability of its Eurasian railway ambitions and consider alternate routes through Central Asia, Turkey, or maritime lanes. The economic fallout was massive. Companies had to revise shipping schedules, recalculate costs, and reconfigure supply chains. European manufacturers relying on just-in-time delivery models struggled to maintain production. Transportation firms found themselves spending more on fuel, rerouting shipments, and dealing with customer frustration. Insurance rates on alternative routes increased, and ports became congested as traders shifted from rail to sea. At the same time, Poland's internal political landscape hardened. Leaders from multiple parties emphasized unity in the face of external threats. Even groups that usually disagreed on domestic issues aligned around the need to secure the borders and maintain pressure on Russia and Belarus. Public opinion in Poland strongly favored protecting national security over maintaining trade convenience, especially given the broader tensions already simmering due to the war in Ukraine and Russian drone incidents near Polish airspace. The wider European community watched with unease. The European Union expressed concern not only over the trade disruption, but also the possibility that the crisis could escalate. Some EU nations urged Poland to consider the economic cost, but others supported Warsaw's firmness, arguing that Europe needed to send a message that hybrid aggression would not be tolerated. Many believed Poland was acting as a frontline state, defending not only its own security, but also the broader stability of Europe. NATO also took notice. This wasn't a conventional conflict with tanks or troops crossing borders. It was a conflict of logistics, influence, and information. Yet military analysts warned that disrupting rail infrastructure could be just as destabilizing as a physical incursion. NATO commanders emphasized readiness and increased intelligence sharing to prevent further sabotage attempts. The alliance acknowledged that Russia's tactics were shifting from open warfare to covert, fragmented pressure strategies. Meanwhile, Belarus found itself deepening its alignment with Russia. Minsk condemned Poland's move and accused it of manipulating security concerns for political gain. But Belarus also had a lot to lose economically. Its rail lines depended heavily on transit fees and trade patterns tied to the corridor. The shutdown hurt Belarusian logistics companies and limited its role as a gateway between East and West. Yet under Russian pressure, Belarus had little room to act independently. As days turned into weeks, the corridor shutdown evolved from a temporary disruption into a major turning point. Even after Poland reopened the border crossings, the damage was done. Trust had been shaken, supply chains were forced to adapt, and businesses realized they could no longer depend on a single route that might become hostage to political tensions at any moment. The corridor went from being a symbol of Eurasian economic cooperation to a symbol of geopolitical vulnerability. The long-term implications are significant. Many experts believe that the Moscow-Belarus corridor may never return to its former prominence. Companies might diversify to southern routes, maritime shipping, or even air freight for critical goods. China might accelerate development of alternate corridors not dependent on Belarus or Russia. The EU may invest more heavily in its own internal logistics to reduce dependency on unstable borders. Poland's decision also introduces a new strategic doctrine, infrastructure as leverage. By showing that it could shut the corridor down instantly, Poland demonstrated that logistics routes are tools of statecraft. This idea is spreading. Other nations may now see their ports, pipelines, and rail lines not just as economic assets, but as strategic pressure points they can use during crises. For Russia, this episode is a setback. It weakens its access to Europe, strains its relationship with Belarus further, and exposes its vulnerability to non-military countermeasures. For Belarus, the crisis deepens economic dependence on Moscow. For Europe, it highlights the need for resilience. And for China, it is a reminder that international trade routes cannot be stable when geopolitics remain unstable. In many ways, this rail war represents a new kind of conflict. A conflict fought not with missiles but with closures, not on battlefields but along logistics lines, not with troops but with economic decisions. It shows that modern power struggles can unfold quietly but still have enormous consequences. Looking forward, the situation remains uncertain. Will Poland implement permanent restrictions if threats continue? Will Russia escalate pressure in new ways? Will China push for diplomatic intervention to protect its supply routes? Will alternative corridors become the new norm? These questions will shape the next chapter of Eurasian politics and global trade. What is clear is that the shutdown of the Moscow-Belarus corridor was more than a border decision. It was a geopolitical earthquake. It forced countries to rethink security, trade, and alliances all at once. And it reminded the world that even something as ordinary as a railway can become a fault line in global power dynamics. If you found this deep dive valuable, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Poland made the right decision? And how do you think Russia, Europe, and China will respond in the long run? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next